It is Wednesday, and Wednesday is that great traditional day where we start thinking about things beyond the working week. For me, apparently, it's the day when I start thinking about the always growing, always living and thriving PR queue that we have on the Lando projects. And if you're somebody that uses Lando, maybe you know a little bit more about Lando, you could know more about Lando than I do, or you could know less than I do about Lando. Both of these are highly probable. That You can contribute. You can contribute just like I'm about to contribute in going through some of our pull requests on the different GitHub repos that power Lando, and you can review them. A lot of them are really simple things. I mean, if you're familiar with open source, you know a lot of pull requests are just documentation changes, language changes. They just require you being able to read. They don't even require you having to replicate something necessarily. And I'll show you kind of different tools that are available within the Lando repos to make the process a little easier. But yeah, so I just wanted to kind of give a quick rundown before I even started into things, a little overview on different ways you can contribute to Lando, and then we'll look at some of the PRs that we have live right now and see if there's any that we can merge in or if there's some that we can give feedback on and see if we can get some cleared out. Yeah, there's a lot of ways to contribute to Lando. We really tried to promote for a while a thing called the Lando Alliance. We don't really necessarily call it that anymore as much, but I think it's actually still a good guide. If you go to our docs site, docs.lando.dev, you'll see kind of an overview if you go to the contributing section of different ways you can contribute to Lando. That could just be telling other people about Lando. That could be writing guides and documentation about Lando. That could be helping us with admin tasks and things. Never had someone take us up on this, which would be great. If you really want to help try to find more sponsors for Lando, corporate sponsors, marketing outreach, other things, we'd love to have somebody help with that. Lots of stuff you can do. Not all of it's coding. One of the biggest, which I believe about 50 people actively do this on a monthly basis right now, is just giving money. If you can't do any of these other things, if your time is really precious, if your time is really precious, give us a few bucks a month to keep on doing Lando. Just that is a huge help. But yeah, there's a lot of great instructions here. There's more information kind of about how the project is managed and helpful hints on other things you can do to help contribute. So definitely check these docs out if you're interested in contributing more to Lando. But let's go into our GitHub repo and actually take a look at some of the pull requests that are live on Lando right now. So I will be completely transparent and honest. I feel like every Lando repo that's out in existence has more PRs on it than we have the time and energy to actually go through and review. So there's pretty much an always present need for a pull request review. Most of the action nowadays, there was a big change that happened to Lando as a project over the last couple months. Lando used to live in a single mono repo. Pretty much everything that composed Lando was in the Lando/Lando repo on GitHub. You'll notice that I'm on Lando/CLI. What's this about? So starting November-ish of 2021, we started splitting out all of these different components that compose Lando. Lando actually has a very powerful plugin system that powers it, and all of its internals use that plugin system. So it was pretty easy for us to actually separate out the different recipes. So things like the recipes for different frameworks like WordPress or Drupal or Laravel, etc. Separating these things out wasn't super difficult into their own repos. And you'll see if you let's go to the core Lando organizational page. If you look at all of our repositories, you'll see a lot of things, but you'll see some things. And you see Pantheon, for example. So Pantheon is a web platform provider. They're a web host, and we have an integration with them. And this Pantheon repo is where all of the code that powers that integration lives now. And formerly, it was just a plugin that lived within Lando, and now it's its own freestanding repository, which is cool because now it has its own issue queue. All of the Pantheon related issues we try to either manually triage or automatically triage into this issue queue. So we know, hey, there's 10 open issues that need to be looked at for Pantheon. So if you're looking for more bugs and things to try to replicate or try to help out with, if you care about a certain piece of Lando, I highly recommend going through the list of different Lando repositories and just maybe watching some of these specific repositories and occasionally going in and seeing if you can replicate bugs, if you can solve bugs, what have you. But this Pantheon repository is a good example too, because it looks like we have an open pull request. Great. Okay, so this is a recent piece of work that I actually was talking with John Millett, who's one of the core Lando maintainers, about just a few hours ago. So if we felt qualified to go in and check this out, we could. I know talking with John about this is maybe a little bit beyond my pay grade. So I'm probably not even going to bother going through this particular pull request to see if it's something I can help out with, but something that I felt like I was, able to actively contribute on. I would just do it. So yeah, so let's go back though. So we have all these different repos that you can take a look at. You can follow for the different plugins. These might be services, things like Solar, or Elasticsearch, or different database backends. These might be frameworks like WordPress or Drupal. These might be integration partners like Pantheon or Platform.sh or Maisie or Acquia. Lots of different things in here. And all of these, by the way, at some point would be lovely to have individual dedicated maintainers for these things. So if that's something you know a lot about Drupal, or say, and if you're you know a lot about Dockerized Drupal setups and Lando Drupal setups, you might be somebody that would be great at maintaining the Lando Drupal repository. Definitely something that we want to be spearheading more in the future. What I'm going to do though, so the core repo that really powers most of what we think of as the core of Lando now is this Lando/CLI repo, and I'm going to dive into that. And I'm going to take a look at what pull requests we have left, because we have 10 of them here, which makes sense. I mean, we usually have quite a few PRs. And I know I was taking a look at this before I hopped on here. I know that this is a very typical PR, right? Language change, great. Fix missing space and scanning for services message, awesome. And I think this is the kind of stuff where it's like sometimes you look at this and you're like, who cares if standby is a noun? But there's definitely a grammar nerd part of me that cares, so this is a good one for me, I guess. And I'll just take a look. I mean, this is obviously something where if I was, if I was being non-critical, I probably would have just merged it right then and there. But I'll just take a look and make sure. You never know. Maybe someone accidentally deletes something. They delete that last apostrophe, and like you're out of luck. You just destroyed Lando by merging this PR. So yeah, so always good to take a look at the files changed and look at the nice GitHub presentation of the Git diff here. And for this one, yeah, so if this was something that was actually changing functionality that I was concerned about, I would definitely boot up Lando. And I am running on my computer, I'm actually running Lando from source. This is another thing that if you really want to get into Lando contribution, you're definitely going to want to do. Let's see if I can actually find where we have the best docs on this. I think that the best docs are actually in the getting started downloading Lando installation. And whilst I set this up. Oh yeah, of course. If I looked at the sidebar here from source, yeah. So if you want to get set up on any operating system and run Lando actually from source, Lando at its core is using Node. So it's a bunch of JavaScript. So if you follow these instructions, you should be able to get Lando set up on your local system running from source, which means then that if you wanted to actually check out a PR that has functional changes to it, which we'll probably do here in a second, you can then check out that branch locally, check out the PR locally, see how it actually runs on your local Lando. But for this one, I'm not going to bother with that. And if I was somebody that didn't have administrative privileges on the repo, I would the best thing you can do is leave a review and just say, hey, this is a good change. Um, you can see here, I mean, this is behind the scenes stuff you probably don't need to know. I could run, we have a full series of tests that run for Lando. All of this is powered on GitHub Actions. If you want to see the full list of tests, for example, on the CLI directory, you'd go into the .github directory in the main repo, take a look at workflows, and then you'd see there's a bunch of YAML files that have the different tests, and they're sort of chunked out into different areas. If we look at PR core tests, so these all happen on pull requests. And here's the actual build of this. We have a testing framework called Leia that's really meant for functional testing of a CLI tool like Lando. It basically is just running bash scripts. Has very easy syntax where if you look at a Leia test, all it's really doing, here, let's actually look at a Leia test. Why am I trying to describe it? We can look at one. Oops, I'm not looking at the right file though. Where is our? We have at least some here. Working example a little while ago. Just not sure where let's look at. So base. You can tell it's been a while since I had to actually look at the Leia test. Okay, yeah. So the Leia tests are actually contained within the README file in a given directory. So a lot of times, one common pattern you'll see in Lando repos is there'll be an examples directory that has self-contained examples for different pieces of functionality in that repo. This is sort of abstract here on the CLI project. It's a lot more concrete if you look at something specific. So going back to the Pantheon repository that we were looking at earlier, if I went into the examples, you'll see there's a bunch of different examples of different versions of of frameworks that the Pantheon hosting platform supports. So if I go into the Drupal 9 example, this actually will spin up a Drupal 9 site using the Pantheon recipe on Lando. And the README is not only a README of what this thing is, but it also contains all of the tests that Leia runs. Leia, our test runner, runs. And as you can see, these are all they are. They're just commands. They're command line commands, mesh commands. They have a text description above them, and when you're actually looking at Leia running these tests on the command line, you would see each one of these text instructions run, and you'll see green if it passes, you'll see red if it fails. It looks very much like any testing framework that you probably have experience with in whatever framework you're working in. So this is a very common pattern. You'll see this all across all the Lando repos. It's also something if you're making a pull request or you're reviewing a pull request for Lando, if there's not a test for the functionality, you should ask the person who made the pull request, or you should implement a test for it. That's a huge thing you can do. It's usually pretty easy to do because you just have to write out the commands that'll do that. Definitely something essential piece of having a PR. Fortunately, for this PR, I don't really even need to care. This is the first time that they're contributing to Lando. So I would need to actually approve their tests. I guess not really necessary. But what I'm going to do, if I was somebody that was coming from outside, I would just add my review. For this one, I'm not even going to leave a comment. I'm just going to say approve. Review, and that would show me if I came in here and if I was somebody else, it would show me, oh hey, someone else actually went through and gave a review on this thing. That's great. It would give us a green light to to squash and merge at that point. And that's what I'm going to do right now, just because I know that this is a low risk pull request. Okay, great. Now, what actually happens after you've approved a PR in the Lando project? It doesn't go immediately, so this isn't getting automatically deployed to everybody with a Lando install. That would be obviously chaotic, even for people that supposedly know things. Like I supposedly know some things, but if I went willy nilly merging things into the core Lando project and they automatically got deployed somehow to people, that obviously would be chaos. Cats and dogs living together, mass hysteria. Um, so what we do is all this stuff goes into the main branch of Lando, but we don't actually do any deploys until we do a tag release. So right now you can see that the latest release is from December. That's actually the latest formal release of Lando. If you're ever curious to get something that's a little bit closer to the edge, we often have pre-releases that are releases that have new updates that we just kind of want to see if there's any problems with them. There's a pretty good community of people using Lando that will install pre-release releases, and we'll give feedback on them. So that's a really useful thing, and definitely something that we appreciate people doing. Best place probably to get feedback, by the way, on these things isn't necessarily opening up a GitHub issue. It's to go to our Lando Slack. And I think if you just look up Lando Slack, you'll probably find, just Google Lando Slack, you'll find, you'll find our docs links. You also find Launchpass is the tool that we use to help get people onto Slack. So it's that Launchpass link. That's what'll get you in there if you're not already on our Slack. That's definitely the best place. Slack is the best place to give us that kind of off-the-cuff feedback where it's like, yeah, I downloaded 3.6.2 and it seemed pretty good, but sort of got some, I saw this thing. Is that actually a problem? And if it's actually a problem, if people are like, yeah, that seems weird, then it's a good thing to go into a GitHub issue. But it's really nice to be able to kind of diagnose things with people more in real time on Slack and not crowd up the issue queue with things that are potentially just something specific to your setup or something else. So we just merged in. Hey, we got rid of, the number went down from 10 to 9. We got rid of one of the pull requests. This is great. What else do we got in here? I haven't looked at the rest of these things. Okay, so some of these things are older. In fact, all of these things are older. This is probably mostly a product of our splitting out of the repo, where a lot of the newer issues were split out into some of the smaller repos. So anything Pantheon related is in that Pantheon repo now. So we don't really have that many pull requests there left. Let's look at an example of pull request that's something that's kind of sat around though, and why it's sat around. Why it's kind of tough. Like this is actually a really interesting pull request. I think it's a really good suggestion. Right now, the width of text output that Lando gives is pretty wide, wider than really suggested. It's just hard to read, and there's other problems. You can see like this. My review here, I think, is the kind of review that we would love to have more of. The kind of comments we'd love to have more of from community members, where it's like, hey, like this does seem like a good change. Doesn't seem to really impact anything else. Let's, I say we do it. You can see though here from my follow-up comment that I had a conversation with Mike Pirog, who's the lead maintainer for Lando, and he feels like there was some sort of reason why we had it at 256, why we didn't have it at 120. There might be some problem with that. And right now he feels like we should really pause on these types of more cosmetic changes until Lando 4 comes out. And this is probably going to be like the most common reason not to make changes, is that we're in this kind of twilight period for Lando 3, where Lando 3 is still very, very active. Tons of people are using it. We have no usable release of Lando 4 yet, but that's where energy is going. Its energy is going into trying to get to Lando 4. And Lando 4 is going to have some pretty significant changes to the way that it handles the command line interface. We're actually going to be changing the underlying engine that powers the CLI to Oak Cliff. I believe. So that could have some pretty big impacts on this. And it may just not make sense to risk breaking something in Lando 3 that would then require more maintainer time to go back and try to fix and to work on, and rather to just focus that time on actually pushing things forward for Lando 4. So that's why this is kind of stagnated. And a lot of these other issues probably are sort of in the same category. Actually, let's see here. So this is, this gentleman wanted us to log more on failures and scans. Interesting. Okay. Okay, and they're from Automatic. They use Lando for their WP. What is it? The WordPress, not Pro. I forget what their hosting solution is, but they use that Lando for their CLI for that. WP VIP. Don't know why I clicked on that. So that's probably why this person was making a contribution, which is awesome. That's how open source is supposed to work. You use something and you can try to contribute back to it. Okay, so this is scanning. I think this is scanning the URLs on new containers to see if they're ready or not. And okay, so he's just adding more verbosity really to this. He's adding an extra, like, okay, login tree saying, hey, we got a good response, and then set the good URL. Then in the case of error, he's adding a bunch more stuff. Interesting. Okay. Which to me, I mean, like this seems, on the face of it, this seems like a good, like it's potentially a good addition. So that's a promising PR in my mind. I would definitely. So my inclination is that I want to go and actually try this out on my Lando. So let's do that. I'm going to switch over to my terminal window. Stop doing whatever chaos I was doing over here. Pump up the size a little bit so maybe people can actually read this. And I'm going to go into, let's say, yeah, Lando CLI. I'm actually going to make sure if I'm up to date. I'm probably super behind. Oh, yeah. Look at that. Lando's super behind. It looks like I was working on something in here previously. Oh, hey, that's funny. This is from way back, probably in December when I was looking at that other PR. So we're gonna check that out. And we are now going to check out the pull request. So you can always, if you have GitHub CLI, I love this thing. Automatic ability to actually check out your PRs. I just, yeah, if you saw that, I just copy and pasted this GitHub PR checkout 69, and we're on it now. I don't have to worry about how I'm going to get that range. This is great. I like simplicity. I like Lando. Okay, so I now have this. I should probably run just in case. I should update my GitHub thing as well. Yeah, so I was just running in case yarn install, just to make sure there's no new packages or anything, or package updates that have happened since I last did stuff. And now at this point, so basically my system's Lando command is symlinked to this directory. That's basically how you run Lando from source. Instead of having a compiled binary like we do in our formal releases, you're pointing a symlinked executable to the actual executable within here, which I forget actually what file is the main executable, but that instruction is in the instructions for running Lando from source. But anyway, so let's actually go. So this is supposed to work. We can at least test out probably the working example of what we're doing here. I'm going to go to one of my many example repos. Hopefully, this one, Lando D9, so a Drupal 9 example. And let's open this up in VS Code. Let's see here. Oh, I was messing around with some code spaces stuff in here earlier. That doesn't matter anymore. Yes, this is me being silly. Okay, so we have a very simple Lando file in this just demo directory project that I have here, um, and I hope this should just start up. We should get some working URLs out of it, and then what we're going to want to do while so I'm going to open up a new window. I'm going to run Lando logs, excuse me. And if we look at Lando logs help, we'll see that we can follow the logs. So we're going to follow them and see if that new, well, we of course need to be in the app that we're working on. So I'm going to go over to my workspace and we're going to do Lando D9 as the project we're looking at. Lando logs follow, flag F for short. Okay, great. And we will, when we actually start this up, okay, we're going to start this Lando start following this. Maybe I actually get my follow command wrong. Is it just a Lando tail? No, pretty sure it should be Lando follow. What I'm expecting it to do is actually do to provide me with a tail version of, yeah, you can see that. Well, that's okay. Let's just run, go back up to this window, Lando logs. Okay, so yeah, this is showing me all the old logs. So right now what I'm seeing that's troubling me is that I am seeing the old logs for a previous execution that's from January, and we are now well into February, even though my brain doesn't think I am. So what am I doing wrong? Actually, not so sure. This app is just really funky. What were we even doing with this thing? Well, I'm just kind of curious too. Does this thing, that site, we visit it. Yeah, okay. Okay. That shouldn't have anything to do with this. That was just us messing around, I think, probably. Let's try spinning up something just from scratch. I'm kind of curious. Directory example Lando, CD example Lando, init. We're just going to run through a raw Lando init, go for the current working directory. We're going to use the just use the 9 recipe like we're working on. We're going to knit here. Great. So Lando init has now created for us a new lando.yaml file. That's all that's living in this repository now. That's great. So we're going to run lando start. That'll actually start up all of the different containers that would be essential for running a Drupal 9 application. The only thing that we're going to be missing is we're not going to have any code. So we're not going to have a Drupal application. To do that, we'd actually need to clone down the Drupal project and probably do a composer install on it as well. The Lando comes with composer, I believe, for this recipe, so you could run Lando composer. You wouldn't even have to have Lando thing. Great, so we have that started up correctly. Let's look at the logs for this thing. Yeah, okay, so that's more what we expect. I don't know what was going on with the application. So these are all the database logs. It's spinning up the database, I believe, where we should be seeing those new log entries from the branch that we're on from the PR should be in the app server. Let's go back. Where were those? Add more logging. Okay. I'm going to look at the diff again for this PR. Where was this? Scan response. Let's look for scan response. Which right now I'm not seeing. Yeah, we are seeing debug entries. So I would anticipate that we should see these if this is actually working. So right now, like this makes me want to dive in further, right, into this PR where it's like, okay, like why am I not seeing this? It's probably my error. I mean, I'm going to be completely transparent about it. It's probably something I'm doing that's wrong, which I'm trying to think what it would be. I don't think we should need to clear the Lando task cache. Lando does have a cache that basically caches the one of the things it does is it caches the commands that are available when you just type Lando. So if you're doing something where you're adding a new command to a given Lando recipe or something like that, you have to clear out. You have to run this Lando clear task, clear Lando task cache. That shouldn't matter for what we're doing right now. I wouldn't think, but very well could. One thing I'm going to try doing actually, just for fun games, I'm going to stop this. Just going to run Lando stop. And then I'm going to run on Lando start, but I'm going to do it with the flag V to have all the verbosity. So we're seeing all the different log things that could be happening right now. Okay, so I did all at once, scan. Okay, there we go. Yeah. So that's interesting. Like this is just telling me that, oh, in fact, I think I might know the reason why this happens. I'm wondering if these things run in the init container. So Lando actually has a separate container that will start up to run certain commands. That's a temporary container. It's not one that persists. And I'm wondering if Lando logs doesn't actually look at that container. It doesn't include that container's output in Lando logs. It only looks at the main service containers. So things like the app server and the database in this case. See like these main services that run the Drupal application. That may be what's going on here. Is that those are the only two things that it matters to it. So we just validated that the new scan response information is included. Cool. That's neat. Didn't seem to cause a problem. And trying to think if there's a good way that we could replicate the error condition here. We could go into the Lando code base and actually cause some sort of error, or do something else. Let's see here. How could we do that? It would be awesome. I'm trying to think if there's a way I could create like a port collision or something. I wonder if I created an app with the same name, I forget what Lando does. That might be interesting to try just in general. Let's try that. I'm going to make directory example Lando 2. Example Lando 2. Yeah, I'm going to do the same init process that we just did, where we're using current working directory. We're going to go to a Drupal 9 recipe there. We're going to call this at my Lando app. Now we're going to start it with flag VPB. We'll see if that creates any sorts of collisions that might give us. Apparently not. That's interesting. I would have kind of expected that these URLs would have had a problem. Okay, well, I'm going to destroy this app because it's confusing to have two apps say the same thing around. Don't do that. Okay. So yeah, so I think what we've done was we verified that at least in the first case, this thing works. Um, I mean, just glancing over the code, I don't see a reason why this other case would not work either. You know, the only reason I could think of is if certain pieces of information they're assuming would be there may not be there in certain circumstances. That's the only thing I'd be concerned about. I don't think that would be the case with this particular instance. So I think it'd be pretty stable. So I'll probably just write a comment to that regard on this PR to say, hey, I tested it out. It definitely the first case works. Um, the error case, maybe I'll ask um, Pirog or John Alette and see if they have, or just ask the Slack channel, like if anyone has ideas, how can I reliably make a URL fail for Lando? I'm sure there's an easy way to doing this. I'm just not thinking right now, but just ask folks what the best way to do that is and just see that output, make sure it doesn't bork something. Maybe try it on a couple different apps. The thing that this is missing, which I would say that this is probably on the borderline. I don't think there's really an argument for making a test case on this one. Um, Lando doesn't have testing quite to that depth. You certainly could. I actually am not. I'm not aware with how much testing we have of logging information. I would guess none or very little. Uh, Certainly, if we were going for the greatest test coverage possible, that would be something that would be interesting to have, but I'm not sure if that's super important what we're doing right now. But yeah, I'll probably, I think this might be where I kind of sign off and let, let people get back to their normally scheduled days. But I think the bottom line is PR review is not that hard with Lando. Definitely go and check out the contribution pages on Lando. We need more people contributing to Lando. And the best way really to contribute, this is, I feel like this is just open source in general, but it's easy to submit, or I'm not gonna say it's easy to submit PRs. Submitting PRs and coding is super, super difficult, especially on somebody else's code base and one that's as complicated as Lando's can be. Um, but it's the process of taking something all the way through completion that is the hardest thing. It's like not only getting the code in front of other people, but having other people review it and provide good feedback and go through different test cases with it. That's the real hard thing. So if you can contribute to any leg of that journey, whether it's writing the code, whether it's reviewing the code, whether it's just contributing some cash to make sure other people can do that, obviously Lando and web development in general goes forward. Yeah, hope everyone's having a good Wednesday, and I look forward. Hopefully, we'll be doing another Orlando live session probably tomorrow, maybe at least on Friday. Trying to do at least a few a week here. I'll put this up on. You'll probably see this on YouTube. But if you are watching this on YouTube at a later date, definitely follow our Twitch. That's where these Orlando lives actually stream live. And if you want to understand why I am confused about something or can't remember something, then you'll remember. It's like, oh yeah, it's because Alex is just doing this live. Like that's what he does. So yeah, definitely recommend following us on Twitch so you can join in on the fun. You can ask me questions and things live. I'll see you guys later.